Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for Atlanta Business Radio. Brought to you by OnPay, Atlanta's new standard in payroll. Now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of Atlanta Business Radio, and this is going to be a good one. But before we get started, it's important to recognize our sponsor, OnPay. Without them, we couldn't be sharing these important stories. Today on Atlanta Business Radio, we have Will Downs with Downs Law. Welcome, Will.
Hey, Lee, how are you doing?
I am doing well. I'm excited to learn what you're up to. Tell us a little bit about Downs Law. How are you serving folks?
Sure thing. Well, Lee, we have a law firm that focuses on commercial real estate and litigation, and really kind of what that boils down to is we negotiate and fight over property and money. So that's kind of what we do. And the way we do it is we just try to do so in a clear, communicable way that kind of articulates the mission, our purpose, our scope of work. And we try to be transparent about the legal process to guide clients throughout.
So now, what's your backstory? Did you always want to be a lawyer? And specifically, did you always want to get involved in this side of the law?
I did not always want to be a lawyer, Lee. I have a journalism background. So I was always interested in stories and telling stories and people. So it is kind of a good segue to the law. So I practiced in journalism for a couple of years and then made the transition to law. So now I get to, when I'm in court, I get to craft the story I want to tell that is designed to persuade the judge or the jurors.
So you get to use that storytelling still comes into play. It's just you're kind of using it a little differently than maybe you envisioned when you were younger.
Yeah, it's interesting because when in journalism you can often take a quite complex piece and you kind of have to distill it into that. However many words you're given or however many, minutes you're given. And the law is the same way. I mean, in court, at least, you don't have a long time to impress people, and you kind of get to the point and you got to choose what's relevant and what's not, and what you think is going to persuade and kind of leave the kind of ancillary details that you may think are interesting, but other people might not out. So it's all about a lot about crafting the story and also in a negotiation, not just in court, but say, a lease negotiation, for instance, it can be a 50-page document. And, you can really get bogged down in a few of the details, that you may have an issue with, but kind of the bigger picture is is this a deal worth entering into or not? And so it's kind of looking at as a lawyer, I try to guide people in looking at the particular provisions that really matter the most to a lease.
And even a negotiation of that kind, it's not always kind of the facts of the matter, right? Like it's the numbers are the numbers, but the story's important as well because people buy things or they negotiate things, and the outcome might not be. Maybe they justify it with numbers, but sometimes the story kind of persuades them to make the deal or not.
Yeah, that's very much truly. And another thing is I often find in leases too, especially from the tenant's perspective, the prospective tenant, they may get, their story they may get really attached to the particular space or the particular business idea, and they may have already kind of convinced themselves that this is what they want to do. And as a lawyer, I'm not ever trying to kill the deal if that's something that you want to do, but I do want to make sure you've considered all the scenarios that may come into play and have done your due diligence to make sure this will be a story with a happy ending.
Right, and they can make an informed decision, not one that's an emotional decision necessarily.
That's right.
So now, being that there's so many different types of lawyers, in your case, you gravitated to this commercial side of the law. Can you talk to the folks out there that are deciding which lawyer I should choose in my situation? Like, is it something that I have to, as a business person, I have to have, 20 different lawyers for every specific specialty, or is it some general purpose lawyers can handle some of this stuff? Like, how do I know when it's time to go for a specialist or a generalist?
Well, that's a really interesting question, and one I've actually dealt with myself. And I'll start by saying this is that, talking to lawyers can often be incredibly confusing. And I am a lawyer, and I find that often, if I'm at, a gathering with another attorney I haven't met before, and they're trying to tell me what they do, often can't even quite make sense of what they're telling me they do. So I certainly sympathize with, the general public or even a business owner who, is looking to hire an attorney, but doesn't quite know how to go about that or what they're looking for. So it can be incredibly, difficult to find the right person. And even in my practice, we often do work out of state. And so I need to associate an attorney in another jurisdiction. And it can be difficult unless, I have a colleague, that I know that I've worked with before. It can be difficult to find someone. So, in hiring an attorney, there's a lot of factors to consider, and because it can be not only a life-changing experience, but incredibly expensive and emotional decision as well. So doing due diligence is important, and as far as the types, of law, generals versus specialists, I don't know that I quite see it that way. I mean, obviously, if there are some certain kind of specialty, I guess, areas of law, I would say, like if you need a, divorce, right? I mean, a bankruptcy attorney isn't going to necessarily be able to help you. So there are some certain specific, categories of law that a consumer or a business owner may be looking for. But what I, often find, that I get, connected with people and businesses, is that I think of myself as our firm is a problem solver, right? So if you have a legal problem, come to us and we can assess, whether it's something that kind of fits within our skill set that we can help with, or if not, we can reach into our network of attorneys and find someone, that can help. But some good resources to find attorneys are obviously, people, other business owners that you trust. Those are always the best referrals. They may not necessarily know exactly what type of attorney you're looking for, but if they recommend an attorney they trust, typically that trusted attorney, will be able to point them in the right direction. Even if it's not a direct connection, that trusted attorney can then refer them to someone that they trust and help you get connected that way. Another, really good thing to do, like with any consumer product, is to try to find reviews. There's a lot of sites out there, Google, there's some other online sites where attorneys can get reviewed. And so when I'm looking to, associate attorneys as well, I'm typically looking at, do they come highly recommended, and what are the types of reviews? Are they reviews that, they've solicited, or do they seem like genuine client reviews? So those are some considerations I would take in mind.
So now, in your work in commercial real estate, obviously, since this is what you're doing every day, you have a depth in that space that obviously other people wouldn't have. Can you talk about, in the commercial real estate world, what are some things, maybe do's and don'ts, when it comes to a lease? If you're if you're representing the landlord or the tenant, it would matter. But if you could break down some do's and don'ts in a lease? Can you share some of that thought leadership with us?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I mean, I think that there's definitely, I'll start with the tenant considerations, just some things to keep in mind, some things that, seen in my practice. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that comes up a lot, is, when do you start paying rent? So as is often the case, you're not, when you're going into a new space, there's some work that needs to be done to it. Often it's not, turnkey, just come in and switch the utilities over. You may, need to reconfigure the space, move some walls around, and, depending on the size of the space, the project, can be quite complex. And so within that, there are a lot of considerations as far as, timing of that, and also the, financing of it. And those are, all interesting topics as well. But I think that the takeaway I always have is regardless of how long or how much you're spending, that at some point, you're going to have to start paying rent, and you really don't want that to happen before you're open for business. And so, try to be realistic about the construction process, and construction right now, is fraught with issues, cost issues, and delay issues. So, be realistic about how much time it will take. If there's things the landlord's doing or are supposed to do in order to get you open for business, what are the potential repercussions if they don't do those things on time? If there's things that you need to do to get open for business, make sure you have enough time, to do all that stuff before you have to start paying rent, because, it's a really significant burden for you to start paying rent before you're making money as a tenant. And it happens a lot more than you would think, just because I think people kind of underestimate, how long it will actually take to do the things they need to do. So talk to your lawyer, talk to other professionals about a realistic time frame and how you can craft, language such that protects yourself in the event there are unforeseen delays. And I think on the landlord side, a lot, landlords, I mean, this is obviously a very landlord friendly state, Georgia, and most leases are very, landlord friendly. So the things that you need to do as a landlord, most often, you've got a form or a lease that you've thought about that or taken that into consideration. But I guess kind of one thing I will note on the landlord's side that can come up a lot is, and then what a lot of landlords don't think about, is that, you need to have adequate security from the tenant that you're leasing to, even if it's a business with an established track record. Not a new business, not a startup, a business with an established track record. I mean, businesses always are in flux. There's ebbs and flows to it. So a landlord will often take a security deposit, but the amount of the deposit should be taken into consideration. It's not uncommon now to see a deposit plus, the last month's rent on hand. That gives you, 2 months of security. Other forms of security can be personal guarantees. Even if you have an established business, perhaps obtaining a personal guarantee from one of the owners or a parent company or another financially solvent company, just to give you that added layer of protection in case things do go south with the lease.
Now, do you work primarily with the landlord or the tenants?
It's just really a mixture. I mean, I'd say it's probably 50-50 on each side of it. So I'm not an exclusively landlord attorney or tenant attorney.
Now, but more things are negotiable than maybe the lay person realizes, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not only the lay person, but even sophisticated, business people. A lot of provisions are negotiable. Now, I mean, when you're negotiating, against a large institutional landlord or tenant, they typically have things that they're not willing to negotiate on. But if you don't ask, you're obviously not going to get it. So, the approach I always take to negotiations isn't, and you see, sometimes you get advice of, well, let's ask for everything and, then we'll whittle it down. I mean, and while that's true to some extent, and you do start out with like a longer list of things that you have concern about, and, isolating the one or two things that are of most concern, always try to be reasonable and not waste everyone's time, right? So if I know, I'm dealing with, a form lease that doesn't have a lot of wiggle room, I mean, we're not going to, I'm not going to waste the client's time or the other side's time, sending back, a document that's, bleeding with red lines.
Now, can you share a story, don't name any names, but an example of how working with your firm or a firm like your firm could actually save a lot of money or make a lot of money for the client?
Yeah, I will say, I think just kind of goes back to on the leasing end. I'm thinking of it, at least it goes back to, just that, due diligence and how long it will actually take to, to be open for business, right? I mean, there's definitely been scenarios where we've, counseled, particularly tenants on, how to protect themselves in the event this project runs long, and pointed out that, the way this, lease is written, you could potentially be on the hook for, 6 months rent or so before you're open for business. And here are some things that you could do to protect against that. I think, that certainly saves clients money in the long run. If
Right. Like an example of that would be like, okay, I'm going to say my lease begins October 1st of this year, or I can say my lease begins when the build out's fully completed. And, right. Like you don't have to have a hard date to start. You can negotiate the date of move-in rather than the date, a certain specific day and time.
Yeah, you can negotiate that stuff. I mean, so, while the landlord may want a date certain, you can make it contingent on, certain things happening, such as, you being able to get a certificate of occupancy, which will allow you to do business in space.
Right, because those things can be like if you're waiting for a permit of some kind, it could be months and you're just sitting there paying rent for months and not being open for business. But if you negotiate it properly, I mean, you could be saving them 4-6 months worth of rent that they didn't pay while they're not making any money.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And especially it really came into play with the, with the pandemic, shutting down a lot of governmental offices. That certainly made permitting, harder to obtain. And, there's lease language you can put in there about, those kind of unforeseen governmental delays, kind of extending the time period for you to do certain things.
So now part of your job is you help your clients collect money that's owed to them?
That's right. Yeah, we do. Like I said, we're fighting over money. So we're trying to get money that is due to clients, whether it be under a lease agreement or a construction agreement or things of that nature.
So can you talk about how do you know when it's worth the effort to try and collect? Is there a dollar amount, or how do you determine like, okay, let's pursue this, or look, I checked them out, that you're just trying to, get money from a black hole here. It's not going to happen.
Well, I'll kind of start. I mean, that's obviously a nuanced question, Lee, and I think it's a very important one. And I'll kind of start by saying this about collections. It's at the end of the day, it's always a business decision, right? For every business is going to be a different set of factors. But it certainly is the cost and time and effort to collect the money versus the amount of money. And I'm not ever going to tell, any business owner that the amount of money that they're trying to get is, too little, if that's really important to them. All I can really advise them on is, what it would take for someone like me to help you get that money. and also, potentially other ways to do it. And the other thing I'll say about collections is this, because I think there's a lot of, it's a hard kind of concept to grasp, but the way I always kind of try to simplify it for people is or any business, is when you're looking to collect, there's really, there's kind of the easy way and the hard way, right? So that, and what I mean by that is there's either you do it outside of court or you do it through court. So, right, outside of court, the easy way, all you can really do in that kind of scenario is just try to get them to the table, right? Try to get whoever's owing you money to come to the table. You can do that through calls, through letters. By the time it gets to me or, attorney like me, it's typically, the business owner is exhausted, all the efforts to try to get compliance with paying the debt. But if you got someone that's not wanting to pay you, your recourse is kind of limited if they're just ignoring you, if they're taking the head in the sand approach. And, if you hire a collection agency, that's really all they're going to do too, right? So the collection agents are not attorneys. They may work with attorneys, but, agencies in and of itself is all they're really going to do is just kind of send letters or make calls, try to coerce payment, try to, settle for some amount. Then what an attorney can assist with is, the hard way, right, is collecting through the court process. And, that anytime you're weighing a decision, whether to file suit against someone, it's an important decision. It's not something you should take lightly. And there's cost factors and not just cost factors, but there's time factor as well. So you turn this over an attorney, but it doesn't mean you get to wash your hands of it, right? You still have to kind of be involved. You still have to provide answers, documents. You may have to appear in court. So there's that kind of time and expense of hiring an attorney. Another thing that kind of comes up, with any sort of debt when you're hiring an attorney is, okay, well, I got to pay you to collect the debt. What about, my legal fees? Can I get those? And that depends. In America, we kind of have this, what's called the American rule, that's each side kind of pays their own legal fees. But as you know, in law, there's always exceptions. So one exception is if you have a written contract that says the other side has to pay legal fees if you win, then you can, recover your legal fees as part of any sort of court award. A little bit outside the scope, but even kind of further nuances. Let's say you go to court and you win and you get a judgment. How do you put that money in your pocket? And that's a whole separate set of questions that we can get into if you want, but we can also save for another time.
Right, but again, having a lawyer as part of your team going in, you can kind of set the stage for that, at least proactively establish that as, okay, I'm going to be able to negotiate that back. If you have planned well at the beginning, right, you can put it as part of your contract that if you don't pay, then you're going to pay the legal fees. Yeah,
and I mean that's any business owner probably has a form contract they're working with, and if it doesn't say anything about legal fees, then just the general rule is you're certainly not guaranteed to get them. So that would be something to consult with an attorney about to make sure your contract, has the provisions it needs to have to make sure if you do have to go to collections through an attorney to make sure you can maximize the recovery. Because I mean, the part that's unfortunate is if you've got a debt and your contract doesn't say anything about legal fees, then it gets expensive really quick, and that starts eating into the amount of recovery you stand to get.
Right. Now, obviously, in today's climate, real estate is very popular. A lot of people are seeing a lot of money being made, and they're trying to get into it. That maybe they don't know kind of some of the potential risks or pitfalls that might happen. Can you share a little bit about some of these things that maybe some danger that people maybe aren't aware of that maybe they should take into consideration before they kind of dip their toe into the real estate world?
Sure. I mean, kind of two kind of quick things kind of come to mind to me, especially right now is, if your project or the deal you're looking at involves construction, those costs are all over the place right now. They change all the time. There's material shortages. So costs can vary widely, and timing is always a problem in construction, but even more so now. So I would just say, having a good understanding of the variables in play for that is certainly something to keep in mind. But then on, specifically kind of on the legal side, this, something that's come up, a fair amount, not just now, but, historically too, is, what happens if someone kind of wants to back out of the contract, right? So you've got a real estate deal or a real estate, agreement that you put in place, and, you're the buyer or the seller, there's some money put down, and one party just kind of backs out. You see that a lot now, especially with, real estate prices still being high, as, people flipping deals, getting an offer or a contract in place on something, but then still shopping it, and then, pulling that deal from you and going with another offer. So what do you do in that situation? So, as a buyer, if the seller is flipping the deal and just kind of breaches the contract, I mean, you have to understand what your recourse is in that scenario, right? You're now kind of in a scenario where, kind of getting back to the collection thing, if you can't just talk them into continuing on with your agreement, what do you do? Well, the only way to legally force someone to do something, right, is you have to get a court order. And so what that looks like from a buyer's perspective is a court order for what's called specific performance, in order to force that seller to sell you the property for the price you agreed to. And while there is that remedy at law, right, and there's plenty of case law to support that remedy, it again is not without its expense and time involved on enforcing that. And so, I've certainly handled scenarios where, we've pursued specific performance, but it can be a complicated and time consuming process. So people lose interest in pursuing that all the way. On the seller's end, if you've got a buyer who, defaults for, reasons, such as, not having enough money to proceed with the deal, or the financing, falls through, typically your recourse under any sort of agreement is to keep that earnest money, keep the deposit money. So, you just need to understand, if a buyer is trying to tie up a deal for a significant period of time while they put together financing, just making sure that, the monies you're getting as security for that are sufficient, to cover you in the event that buyer defaults, realizing that you may, lose out on being able to market the space or enter into agreement with other prospective buyers during that time period.
Man, there's just so much. And this is why it's so important to have the right trusted advisor as part of the team, because you need people watching your back. A lot of this stuff is not obvious. A lot of this stuff is more complex than you would imagine. So having a trusted advisor is critical when especially you're dealing with these kind of complex deals and complex interactions. Now, Will, what could we do to help you? What do you need more of right now?
Just like everybody, Lee, we need more time, right?
More time, yeah. So I can whip up some more time for you.
Can you create that 8th day?
Yes. We've been working on it.
That would probably be a bad thing, wouldn't it?
Really, I don't know if that would help. So what do you need more of? Are you looking for more clients right now? Or are you looking for more talent? What can we do to help?
Well, we're always, Lee, we're always open to working with new clients. We like building relationships, long-standing relationships with clients. So if you're a business owner or property owner who's looking, has a legal need or looking to develop a relationship with an attorney, we'd love to serve you. We try, like I said, we try to be upfront, about what we do, what we can handle, and what we can offer. And we tried to really use technology to kind of streamline our processes, so that we can service the volume of clients that we want to service and build those relationships that we really value. So, when I started my firm, it's been about 8 years ago. One of the great things about it is I still have, several of the clients that were with me from the beginning are still with me. So I like building relationships, and working with the same people because, we kind of learn a working style together. And so that's always been one of the joys of mine and one of the reasons I started my own firm is to be able to take on more things and more different types of things, than I could when I was working at a larger firm that had kind of more kind of parameters or kind of safeguards around, just kind of being able to take more stuff. So yeah, I'm always looking to build relationships, Lee. So if you or your network want to reach out, I'd love to talk with you.
So if somebody wants to have a more substantive conversation with you or somebody on your team, what's the website?
So our website is DownsLawLLC.com. So it's Downs, DOWNS, lawllc.com. Our phone number is 404-842-6500.
Well, Will, thank you so much for sharing your story today. You're doing important work and we appreciate you.
All right, thanks, Lee. Thank you for your work as well.
All right, this is Lee Cantor. We'll see you all next time on Atlanta Business Radio.